The first thing I noticed about Ben Carter wasn't the silence of his chart or the unusual nature of his referral. It was the absolute stillness of him. I'd been a registered nurse for 15 years, working the neurology ward at St. Jude's Medical Center for 10 of them. I'd seen it all, the tremors of Parkinson's, the violent seizures of epilepsy, the gradual fading of Alzheimer's. I'd held the hands of the terrified and calmed the frustrations of the angry. I thought I'd encountered every possible human response to a failing nervous system. But I never saw any patient like him before in my life. His file landed on my desk on a rainy Tuesday morning. Sarah, my charge nurse, Brenda, had said, her voice holding a note of caution she usually reserved for difficult family members. "We have a new long-term admission. Room 304, Ben Carter, 38 years old, diagnosed with a progressive, unidentified neurodegenerative disorder. Full physical paralysis, including voluntary eye movement and respiration. He's on a ventilator." I skimmed the sparse paperwork. It was shockingly bare. No long list of medications, no previous hospitalizations, no family contacts listed. Just a name, an age, and a devastating, anonymous sentence, complete locked-in syndrome, etiology unknown. "Who's his doctor?" I asked. "Dr. Evans," Brenda said, naming the head of our department, a man known for his brilliance and his impatience. "It's a private case. Very hush-hush. The funding is coming from a private research foundation. That explained the lack of history. And his cognitive status, the file says, preserved. All his cognitive tests, before he lost his last mode of communication, were off the charts. Genius level, but that was 6 months ago. Now, well, you'll see." I finished my coffee, the bitter taste lingering as I gathered my supplies. Room 304 was at the end of the hall, a corner room that was usually reserved for patients who needed extra quiet. I pushed the door open, my standard cheerful greeting already forming on my lips. It died there. The room was dim, lit only by the gray daylight filtering through the rain-streaked window. The hiss and click of the ventilator was the room's heartbeat. And in the center of it all was Ben Carter. He was propped up at a 45-degree angle, his body a slender outline beneath the stark white sheets. He had close-cropped brown hair and a face that would have been handsome, with strong features and a firm jaw, if it weren't for the utter, profound lack of expression. It wasn't a mask of sleep or peace, it was the absolute neutrality of stone. His eyes were open, a clear, startlingly blue, and they were fixed on the ceiling. "Good morning, Ben. My name is Sarah. I'm going to be your primary nurse," I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. There was, of course, no response. No flicker in the eyes, no twitch of a finger. Nothing. I went about my initial assessment with a practiced, clinical efficiency. I checked his ventilator lines, his feeding tube, his IV drip. I took his vitals, which were, paradoxically, perfect. His heart rate was a steady 68, his blood pressure 120/80ths. His skin was clean and intact, a testament to excellent previous care. He was, physically, a perfectly maintained machine, save for the one crucial part that was broken, the connection between his mind and his body. As I worked, I talked to him. I always talk to my patients, even the ones in comas. It was a matter of respect, an acknowledgement of the person who might still be inside. Quite a storm out there. My dog, Barney, was not a fan this morning. Nearly pulled my arm off trying to get back inside after his business. I glanced at his face. Nothing. His eyes remained fixed on a point on the acoustic tile ceiling. "I'm just going to check your pupil response now." I shone my penlight into first one eye, then the other. The pupils constricted perfectly, but as the light moved away, his gaze didn't waver. It was unnerving. Most patients, even in deep comas, would have some roving eye movement, some tiny, involuntary sign of a living system. Ben had none. He was a statue with living eyes. I finished my tasks and stood back. A profound sense of helplessness washed over me. How do you care for someone when you have no idea if they can even perceive you? The file said his cognition was preserved, but what did that mean? Was he a conscious, thinking, feeling person trapped in a marble prison? Or was the lights on nobody home scenario some doctors whispered about true? "I'll be back in a few hours to reposition you," I said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "If you need anything, well, just. I'll be back." I turned to leave, and as my hand touched the door handle, I had the most peculiar sensation. It felt like I was being watched. Not in a casual way, but with intense, focused attention. I glanced back over my shoulder. Ben Carter's eyes were no longer on the ceiling. They were directly on me. A chill, completely separate from the hospital's air conditioning, traced a path down my spine. It was impossible. He couldn't move his eyes. The chart was explicit. It had to be a trick of the light, or perhaps I'd misremembered where he was looking. I shook my head, chiding myself for being spooked, and left the room. The feeling stayed with me all day. The next morning, I brought a small, battery-operated radio into his room. I set it on the bedside table, tuned to a classical station. A little music might be nice, I told him. I find Vivaldi helps with the paperwork. Again, no response. I went about my routine, but I was hyper-aware of his gaze. I made a point of noting its position when I entered. It was on the window. As I was adjusting his bedding, I happened to look up. His eyes were on my hands. My breath hitched. I stopped, stared directly at him, waiting for a flicker, a tremor, anything. His eyes remained steady, locked onto mine now with an unnerving intensity. "Can you understand me, Ben?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Nothing. No blink. No change in the rhythm of the ventilator. But the eyes were screaming. I went to Dr. Evans that afternoon. "About Ben Carter in 304, I began. He held up a hand. "Sarah, I know he's an unusual case. The Foundation is working on a new communication interface. Something based on subvocalization or neural pattern recognition. It's months away, at best. For now, our job is to keep him physically healthy. That's all. But his eyes, doctor. I think he's tracking movement. I think he's aware." Dr. Evans gave me a patronizing smile. "It's a common illusion, Sarah. With patients in a persistent vegetative state or locked-in syndrome, caregivers often project awareness onto random ocular movements. It's called somatic marker hypothesis, a trick of the brain looking for patterns. His chart is clear. No voluntary eye movement. Treat him with care, but don't anthropomorphize the condition." I left feeling dismissed and frustrated. I knew what I'd seen. I wasn't a rookie nurse seeing ghosts. I'd been doing this too long. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of those blue eyes, the intelligence I felt burning behind them. I thought about the sheer, unimaginable horror of being fully conscious, fully aware, and trapped in a body that was a tomb, unable to scream, to cry, to even close your eyes to block out the world. It was a fate worse than death. The next day, I decided to conduct my own experiment. I brought a book with me to his room, a collection of Sherlock Holmes stories. I pulled a chair up to his bedside. "All right, Ben," I said, my tone conversational. "I'm going to read to you. If you can hear me, if you understand me, I want you to try and move your eyes down to look at the book." I waited. His eyes remained fixed straight ahead, on the wall past my shoulder. My heart sank. Maybe Drive. Evans was right. Maybe it was all in my head. I opened the book. Chapter 1. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I began. I read for about 10 minutes, my voice the only sound besides the mechanical breath of the ventilator. I felt foolish. I was about to close the book when I saw it. A movement. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift. I stopped reading instantly. His eyes had moved, just a fraction of a degree. Down and to the left. Toward the book. My own eyes welled up with tears. I quickly blinked them away. This wasn't a moment for sentiment, it was a moment for confirmation. "Ben," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. "Did you just look at the book?" I waited, staring intently. For a long moment, nothing. Then, with agonizing slowness, his gaze shifted back from the book, up to my face. It was a deliberate, controlled movement. There was no doubt. He could hear me. He could understand me. He was in there. "Oh, my God," I breathed. "You're in there." There was no joyful reunion, no dramatic change. Just the continued, silent screaming from his eyes. But now, I could hear it. From that moment on, everything changed. My shifts became focused on room 304. I wasn't just maintaining a body, I was communicating with a person. We developed a rudimentary system. One look down for no, a sustained look at me for yes. It was painstakingly slow, but it was a lifeline. I learned about him, piece by painstaking piece. Yes, he had been a theoretical physicist. Yes, he remembered everything about his life before this. Yes, the pain was sometimes unbearable, not physically, but mentally. The frustration, the loneliness, the sheer boredom of staring at a ceiling for months on end. I brought in a laptop and set up a keyboard on the screen. I would slowly move a cursor over each letter. "Look at me when it's over the letter you want." It took us an hour to spell a single sentence. His first sentence was, "Thank you for seeing me." I cried that day, in the supply closet, for a solid 10 minutes. I learned he had no family. His parents were gone, he had no siblings, and his work had been his life. The private foundation funding his care was the defense contractor he'd worked for. They were keeping him alive, I realized with a cold dread, not out of compassion, but because his mind was a unique asset. They were waiting for the technology to tap into it again. Dr. Evans was not pleased when I told him. He reiterated that the official communication project was the only sanctioned method. I was overstepping. I was creating false hope. But I didn't care. I had seen the spark of relief in Ben's eyes when I understood him. That was real. One afternoon, we were working on our slow, digital conversation. The cursor was painstakingly making its way across the alphabet. S, T, O, P. I paused. Stop what, Ben? The cursor moved again. T, H, E, M. Them. Who's them? T, H, E, Y, K, N, O, W. A new kind of chill, one laced with fear, settled in my stomach. Who knows? The doctors. The foundation. Y, E, S. His eyes were locked on mine, wide with a silent urgency. P, R, O, J, E, C, T, N, E, M, E, S, I, S. Project Nemesis. What is that? C, A, N, T, T, R, U, S, T, T, H, E, Y, L, I, S, T, E, N. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying clarity. The private funding, the hush-hush nature, Dr. Evans's dismissals. They knew he was aware. They had to. The communication interface they were developing was probably already functional. They were just choosing not to use it with me. They were listening to everything we said. Ben wasn't just a patient, he was a prisoner. His body was the cell, and this room was the prison walls. My nursing brain, trained in protocols and hierarchies, screamed at me to report this, to go to the administration. But the look in Ben's eyes, a look of pure, undiluted terror, stopped me. He was trusting me with this. The only person who had seen him for who he was. I understand, I said softly, my mind racing. I pointedly looked around the room, my eyes scanning for hidden cameras or microphones. Well, your vitals look excellent today, Ben. I think we'll try some passive range of motion exercises tomorrow. I was playing a part now, for an unseen audience. I was the dutiful, slightly dim nurse, and he was the unresponsive patient. Our real communication had just become a dangerous secret. Over the next week, our conversations, when we dared to have them, became more strategic. We used the book. I would ask yes/no questions about the story, and his answers would spell out a different message. It was a complex, nerve-wracking code. He told me Project Nemesis was a predictive algorithm he'd been developing for geopolitical modeling. It could, with terrifying accuracy, simulate global conflicts, economic collapses, and societal shifts. He had discovered a flaw, or rather, a feature his employers intended to exploit. It could also be used to manipulate those events, to create instability for profit. He had tried to shut it down, and shortly after, his illness had begun. He believed it was induced, a targeted neurotoxin that mimicked a rare disease. He wasn't just locked in, he was silenced. The gravity of it was overwhelming. I was a nurse, not a spy. I was in over my head. But I couldn't abandon him. I saw the person he was, brilliant, witty in his slow, typed words, and deeply kind despite his circumstances. He asked about my day, about Barney, about my life. In the midst of his own unimaginable hell, he cared. The crisis came on a quiet Thursday. I walked into his room to find Drive Evans and two men in severe, dark suits standing around his bed. One of the men was holding a sleek, tablet-like device. Sarah, Drive Evans said, his voice tight. These gentlemen are from the Asymmetrics Foundation. They're here to initiate the new communication protocol. Ben's eyes were wide with panic, fixed on me. That's wonderful, I said, forcing a smile. I'm sure Ben is eager to finally communicate properly. Oh, we're sure he is, the man with the tablet said, his smile not reaching his eyes. We've been looking forward to catching up. They hooked the device to sensors they placed on Ben's scalp. A wave of synthesized speech filled the room, the voice a flat, genderless monotone. System online. Neural interface established. The man with the tablet looked at Ben. All right, Drive, Carter. Let's start with the Nemesis core access codes. We know you've been having some unauthorized conversations. Let's get everything back on the record, shall we? I stood frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. They were going to strip his mind bare, take what they wanted, and then what? Would they keep him alive? Or would his progressive disorder suddenly take a fatal turn? Ben's eyes were locked on mine. In them, I saw a desperate plea, and then, a fierce, determined resignation. He was going to fight them. He would try to refuse, to give them nothing, even if it meant his own destruction. I couldn't let that happen. Wait, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. All three men turned to look at me. Before you begin, his ventilator settings need to be adjusted. His blood gases from this morning were off. Dr. Evans, you saw the report. If we don't recalibrate, we risk respiratory acidosis. It was a complete lie. A gamble. I was betting on Dr. Evans's clinical pride in the suits, ignorance of medical details. Dr. Evans looked momentarily confused, then annoyed. I didn't see any. I emailed it to you first thing, I interrupted, staring him down, trying to project an authority I didn't feel. It must have gotten lost. It's critical. The machine is in the respiratory therapy closet. I'll need your key. For a heart-stopping second, I thought he would call my bluff. But then, with a frustrated sigh, he said, fine. This will only take a moment. Gentlemen, the suits looked irritated but nodded. As Dr. Evans turned to lead them out, I shot a look at Ben. His eyes held a question. I gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The moment the door closed, I sprang into action. I wasn't a spy, but I was a nurse, and I knew how to move in a crisis. I went not to the ventilator, but to the IV pole. I quickly swapped out the bag of saline for a bag of a powerful sedative I had secretly prepared and hidden in my pocket days before, a desperate contingency plan I never thought I'd use. I set the drip to a slow, steady rate. It wouldn't knock him out, but it would make his neural signals fuzzy, unreliable. It would corrupt the data. I had just finished when the door opened. The suits were back. The report wasn't in my inbox. Sarah, drive. Evans said, his eyes narrowed. My mistake, I said smoothly. It was in the shared drive. Must be the new system. It's all sorted now. The man with the tablet turned it back on. Resuming interface. The synthetic voice returned, but now it was garbled, nonsensical. Access denied, core, thermal, event, banana, repeat, banana. The man cursed. What's wrong with it? His readings are all over the place. Dr. Evans looked at the vitals monitor, then at Ben. His heart rate is elevated. He's under stress. This might not be the best time. It has to be now. The suit snapped, but the data was useless. A stream of gibberish. After 20 minutes of frustration, they gave up, unplugging the device with muttered threats about recalibrating and trying again tomorrow. When they were gone, I stood by Ben's bed, my legs shaking. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. Not just gratitude, but a fierce, proud light. He had fought, and I had fought with him. We had won a battle, but the war was far from over. They would be back. We both knew that, but we also knew something else now. He wasn't alone, and I wasn't just his nurse anymore. I was his accomplice, his lifeline, the only voice he had in a world that wanted to silence him forever. I never saw any patient like him before in my life. He was a tragedy and a miracle, a prisoner and a revolutionary, all contained within a silent, still body. And as I looked into his brilliant, alive eyes, I knew my life, and my definition of care, had been irrevocably changed. The real work was just beginning.